The Seiko 5 GMT line hasn't been around that long, but they are releasing model variants all the time. And this one revisits the modern classic with a fresh new look, combining the same reliable function that we know of the Seiko 5 GMT line with a refined aesthetic that elevates it to new heights. It's the sort of dial design that I really like. And it's the sort of dial design I think most of us will probably be looking to purchase of the entire model line. Now, aesthetically, this watch is different than the Seiko 5 GMTs before it because it now has a silver sunburst dial paired with a black and blue bezel, which adds a layer of sophistication, being basically like a polar Batman style GMT watch. Now, the standout feature of this watch is, yes, the dial, but also I think a lot of it has to do with the hands, because on this silver sunburst dial, I notice how reflective these silver hands are on the watch. These metallic hands definitely stand out more. Plus, while the GMT hand is blue as well, it's also very metallic in its paint. And so it matches both the bezel really well, and it gives it sort of this almost like a blue car metallic luster, which I think is something I didn't really expect, and in bright light is really nice. Now, the watch generally remains unchanged. It's still the 42.5mm case design that looks exactly the same as it did on the SKX variants. It still has that same robust wrist presence. And so if you're someone that's been looking at the Seiko line or the SKX line, and you've looked at these GMT variants, this is going to give you the same sort of look, feel, and aesthetic that you know out of all of those. Now, the bezel still features the same 24-hour scale, which is both functional and aesthetically nice, with bold numerals, and it is a bi-directional friction bezel. So it has no ratcheting whatsoever, it spins freely, and you can accidentally knock it and move it, which obviously goes into my downsides I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, the SSK 033 offers a lot of the things we're seeing out of GMTs these days, which is a more affordable package, utilizing Seiko's 4R34, which is an automatic GMT movement, which is built upon the same reliable workhorse base model movement like the 7S26 or the NH34 that Seiko's been selling for a long time. It has a 41-hour power reserve, 21,600 vibrations per hour to ensure constant performance. It also offers hacking, hand winding, and obviously the ability to adjust either the GMT hand or the date. So this is a desk GMT rather than a traveler style GMT, so you won't be able to adjust the hour hand independently. That's one thing you definitely need to note on this watch and any of the Seiko GMT watches I've seen so far. This has hardlex crystal on the front with a Cyclops, and it has a non-screw down crown, which is one of the other changes from the SKX line. Now, to zoom out a bit, Seiko excels in making watches that feel as good as they look. And this watch is no exception. See, it's silver. It's got the same applied Seiko, which especially in macro, I think looks fantastic. That applied Seiko logo just looks so great. And this offers such a great package that I think would easily be worn whether you're in the office or out doing something a little bit more adventurous. This is the sort of watch I think that can very easily be dressed up, especially on the factory bracelet, which is this 5-link style, which is basically a Jubilee, although Seiko won't call it that I think is also a more refined version than maybe the SKX was at that time. You still have the same stamped clasp though, which a lot of people are gonna hem and haw about and dislike. But with Seiko, you find your cost cutting in certain ways, and you find it here now on this clasp. It hasn't really changed that much since the SKX. But the end links now are solid end links versus folded end links, and each of the links in the middle are also solid as well. You still have a pin and collar system, and you still have the flat underside, which means it's going to be pinching your hairs off, which is why, while it can be dressed up on that, I put it instead on this strap here. This is an Artem style strap. This is their sailcloth, 22mm with a deployant clasp on the back. I wear these things like crazy. I just put them on most of my watches because they're just easy, functional, and very comfortable. So if you're interested in that, I do have a link to Artem straps down below. Now, that is an affiliate link, so if you do buy something from them, I get a small commission, but it doesn't change the price that you pay. So in the ever-growing landscape of affordable GMT watches, the SSK 033 reasserts Seiko's dominance, showing that they can create a slight style change to make a watch feel brand new. You see, this watch doesn't feel like an SKX. And I don't know if it's because the dial is this polar style dial or what, but it feels a little bit more refined than a lot of the other GMT lines that I actually reviewed when these first 3 colorway variants came out now 2 years ago. This is a great iteration of a watch that I think most people are going to buy as one of their first watches when they're first getting into mechanical watches, and especially at the price points you typically can buy somewhere around the $280 to $380 mark, despite the MSRP being close to $500. And that's something that, again, is really nice about Seiko, that this is still being sold at a pretty affordable price point in the grand scheme of things, especially given the fact that I would highly recommend this watch to someone who wasn't in the hobby and wanted something they could wear with a suit or at work or in casual clothing. This is the sort of watch I think that encapsulates both a feel, a wrist presence, and an aesthetic vibe that really easily can bridge between those. Not to mention the added functionality I think gives it a unique flavor and makes it maybe practical. Although the GMT hand on my Rolex Explorer 2, for example, I almost never use unless I'm traveling and then I use the function. But typically a GMT just has that 4th hour hand as like an aesthetic thing that a lot of people don't actually use it outside of having it there, or maybe you program it to GMT time and even then you don't necessarily use it on a day-to-day function. Now, there are still negatives to this watch. Obviously, I've mentioned the fact that the bracelet still pulls hair, it still has the stamped clasp, it still has the pin and collar system, but on the watch face itself, one thing I really want to note is the fact that this is a silver, not a white. So if you're looking for a straight polar dial, this is not that. It is obvious that it is silver and that it is not straight white. I think it still looks nice, but that was surprising when I got it out of the box because I kind of expected more of a white tone. Also, the bezel here being black and blue is really not that loud. The blue is a metallic blue, as I mentioned before, which means in certain lighting, it dips so many shades that it almost looks like very like navy or dark blue, almost black, to the point where the bezel looks like it's almost entirely black all the way around. And I think if they'd gone for more of a matte finish or a little bit lighter shade of blue, it would have been more obvious the difference between those two colors, and then it would have looked a little bit nicer. I prefer a little more contrast on a bezel rather than having them blend together. But that's sort of the downside when you go for a metallic blue, that it can drop so many different shades all at once depending on the lighting. Obviously in bright lighting it is very blue, and so it's more obvious, but I think it would look aesthetically nicer if the blue was just a little bit lighter, a little bit more noticeable. The other negatives are going to be the fact that they still don't sign their crown. Seiko has kind of kept the same mold since the 90s on this style watch, and they haven't really changed it. I don't think they're ever going to change it. I think that would be a nice little touch to add that. I like that they keep the same drilled lug holes and the same case architecture, but these little functions and features you would kind of expect these days. I do like a screw down crown versus a just press in crown. I think the screw down crown gives me more reassurance, I suppose, although I do know that that crown tube will strip out over time if I keep undoing it and redoing it. And that's something I've talked about in a different video when I've talked to watchmakers. They don't like screw down crowns, or some of them don't like screw down crowns because that crown tube can get stripped out. Part of the reason why Panerai has that lever is that reason. But, I like having a screw down crown for me just because I like being assured that it is watertight. It's like when you pat your pockets, 16 times before you jump into a pool because you still feel like your phone somehow is still there. Same sort of thing with this. If it doesn't have a screw down crown, I always feel a little unsure of whether or not I should jump in with it on. And that's definitely a downside. The last downside is just this bezel. It is a friction bezel, but the friction required to turn it, like the actual pressure required to turn it or torque required to turn it, is really light. Like, it's super easy to bump this thing. Like, you can see me just like hitting it and I can turn it super easily. And I do like, if it's going to be a friction bezel, for it to be a bit tighter, so that way I don't have so much slop. I find myself readjusting it back to 24 all the time. So if I was actually using this for its function, I think I'd be really frustrated at having to put it back where I was trying to keep it to be able to track a time zone. Unless I'm on my computer it moves all the time. And that's just something you have to know. I still think it's a great watch. I like it. I'm gonna keep it in my collection and really enjoy wearing it. I might even bring it on my Christmas trip that I'm doing upcoming, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Given the fact that it's a GMT watch and I can wear it out in the streets in other cities and not have to worry about anyone trying to steal it from me, this is definitely gonna be one of my companions that goes with me along with my Rolex Explorer 2. But what do you guys think about the Seiko GMT? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.